Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Cassie Riva. I'm the events coordinator at an Unlikely Story bookstore in Plainville, Massachusetts. Before we start, here's a couple technical tips. Questions for the author can be written in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, or in the chat, or in the Facebook comment section. If you'd like to buy the book, click the green button at the bottom of your screen, and it's going to take you to our website. And when you purchase Adam Gustavson's new picture book, The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep, from an Unlikely Story, you're going to get an autographed bookplate from the author, which includes a special QR code that's going to grant you access to a hidden Froggies music video and song download, and it's awesome. You have to try it. Adam Gustavson has a bachelor's degree in illustration from Rowan University and a master's from the School of Visual Arts in New York. He's illustrated more than 30 books for children, including the award-winning Good Luck, Mrs. K, Long Arm Ludi in the First Women's Olympics, Flip, How the Frisbee Took Flight, and Dirty Rats. The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep is Adam's author-illustrator debut. When he's not illustrating books, Adam paints and teaches art in New Jersey, where he lives with his wife and teenage sons. The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep makes a delightful picture book story time for children and they're all going to adore Adam's colorful illustrations and zany characters. And tonight, Adam's going to even teach you how to draw some of his characters. So make sure you have some paper and a writing utensil handy. Adam Gustavson, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, there we are. Thank you so much for hosting me. I'm Adam Gustavson. I'm here in my scenic attic studio. I've got frog paintings and paints and a book, and I'm very excited to be here in outer space where we all are in this internet age, but with you. So we are going to start off today with a little reading of The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep. Now, I say it's a little reading because I'm not actually allowed to read the whole book today for really fancy copyright reasons. It's takes 32 pages to write this stuff. But I will read you about half the book. We will leave off on an appropriate cliffhanger, and then we will move over to the easel and do some frog drawing, because that's what we would be drawing. And after that, we'll have a little bit of possibly a sing-along. Sing-alongs all depend on whether or not everyone has figured out the words. But if you figure out the words, it's definitely a sing-along. And if you don't figure out the words, but you just jump in place, it becomes a hop-along. And hop-alongs are just as good as sing-alongs in this case in particular. So without further ado, we're going to start a reading of The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep. And we'll do it via a fancy high-tech screen share. All right. The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep by Adam Gustavson. It's got fancy printed and illustrated end pages. Not every book has these. This makes us very special, you and I. The Froggies Do Not Want to Sleep by Adam Gustavson. The Froggies do not want to sleep. They want to hop. Yes, they do. They want to practice their accordions and ride their unicycles like every frog, and play dress-up. But they do not want to sleep. They want to go for long drives in the country and joust like knights. They want to dance underwater ballet and tame ferocious beasties. They want to sing opera while firing themselves out of cannons. Nice hat. Nice hat. They are far too busy flying their spaceships and zipping through galaxies. They look pretty good at that too, if you ask me. Anyone can fly a spaceship straight, I think. Drinking fizzy soda and holding burping contests with strange alien life forms. And that is where our partial reading is going to end. So more stuff happens. There's a way to find out what that is. So while you think about that, because there's a little green button on the screen that'll take care of that for you. But while you think about that, we're going to switch our cameras over to a sketchpad cam, I'm going to call it. That's a very fancy term. You can tell I'm into fancy things tonight. So our fancy term here is we're going to switch over to our sketch cam. And, well, it let me do it. Okay, let's give me a moment to figure this out. It worked before, I swear.
You got this. We'll get this.
I know, we'll get it. Here we go. Wait a minute. There we go. All right. Haha. There it is. Let me just... One other thing. Okay, that microphone works now too.
So this should take us over to the sketch pad. Now, if we're going to draw a froggy in this space on the sketch pad, there's a couple things we need to figure out first. One, we should give ourselves a little line at the top and at the bottom. All right, so we know how big we want our froggy to be on our page. And then we have to figure out what our froggy is going to be doing. Now, I think I'd like my frog to be standing doing something. It seems like a perfectly reasonable thing for a frog from this book to be doing. Now, frogs mostly have a big head and long legs and big eyes. So I'm going to draw a big oval here, and that's where most of his head is going to happen inside of. And then he's got a little bitty body with a little belly. And on his head, he's got kind of big round eyes. One on this side and one over on the other side of the oval. Now, the frog's head is mostly face parts that stick right together. So right under his eye, we get right into his mouth. So if he's smiling, his little smiley corner comes right up to the bottom of his eye, right out here to his little nose area, which then comes right back to this other eye. And then his bottom jaw takes up the rest of this room. Now, this whole thing isn't just one eye, because then he'd have just an eyeball sitting on top of his head. And being a frog is dangerous enough. You don't want to worry about poking yourself in your eye with one big eyeball sticking on top of your head. So he needs his eye to be set inside an eye socket. So here still is that big round eye inside a big round eye socket on top of his little oval head with his big mouth. And then right back here between his mouth and his eyes, frogs have a little oval. It's sort of like an eardrum kind of on the outside that serves as their ear. And then in here will be his eye, or his pupil. Now, the funny thing about frogs, and I found this out when I decided to make a book about frogs falling asleep, is that frogs don't close their eyes. So if this frog actually was going to try to go to sleep, all he'd be able to do is close his pupil. And there, look, he already looks like he's sleeping. But we don't want this one to be sleeping. We want him wide awake, not at all ready for bed. Now, the frog's arms are kind of small. They can do just about anything in here. So I want to find his legs first. Now, the frog's legs are kind of broken up into three parts like ours. There's a thigh, there's a shin and calf, and then there's a foot. In a frog's case, all of these, at least the way I draw frogs, all of these are about the same length. So if that's his thigh, it's shaped kind of like a string bean. You can laugh, but our thighs, as people, are just, they're shaped kind of like eggplants. Frog thighs are kind of stretched out a little, so it's a little more like a string bean. And then another slightly less regular string bean coming down from there. And then his other leg, all right, it's going to come out from that side of his body. But like most things we see, something is always in front and something is always in back. So one leg is going to seem a little bigger and closer to us, and the other leg is going to seem a little smaller and hidden partly behind that first one. And he's got long feet with 5 finger-like toes. They have webbing between them, but not as much as a lot of people think, and from the angle we're looking at, we're really not going to see it. As a matter of fact, we're barely able to see the toes. So, now, in order to draw the frog's arms, because they can be doing anything, I think the most important thing is going to be finding the frog's banjo. All right? Because his arms, I mean, they have to be holding it, and they have to be playing it correctly. So you can't really figure out how to draw his arms unless you've figured out his banjo. It's a very common misconception in drawing frogs. You'll see a lot of people start to draw frogs and they don't find the banjo early enough. And we want to find out what direction he's kind of pointing the banjo in. And we have to decide if frogs play a 5-string or 4-string banjo. My thought on this is that they play the 5-string banjo, but they're actually better at the 4-string. The trouble is they've only got 4 fingers. 5 toes, 4 fingers. which is why when you go out in, in swamps and in the woods, you're more likely to find frogs playing the ukulele or the 4-string banjo. But this guy is kind of ambitious, and if he doesn't want to go to bed, he probably wants to find an instrument that he has to practice really hard at to say that, no, this is really important. So if that's where his banjo is, now I know I need to get his hand over to the strings. That's going to call for a little bit of erasing, which is okay. I erase more than I draw, and especially when I'm being a professional artist. Sometimes you just have to try things out and even make mistakes in order to find out what you need to fix about your drawing. And so I don't mind having my eraser around all the time and changing things the longer I work on a drawing. But right there, you know what? I'm even thinking one of these fingers could be going a little crazier than the others. So let's get this one to get some real energy in it. And then over here, we're going to tuck behind that hand, we're going to see his other frog hand. And I like having them overlap, so they're actually a little confusing to watch. Because sometimes watching someone play an instrument really well, like this frog, is kind of confusing for us to watch. So I don't mind if we get a little confused looking at it. I think that's actually perfectly okay to show, just to show that this frog is clearly doing something so well that we couldn't possibly understand it. So the next part of it is, I want my frogs to look kind of realistic. Now, not everybody drawing has to do this. But for me, I like to think of everything as having light and shadow on it. Things going in front of and behind each other. So lots of other artists will draw a frog differently. Lots of other artists will draw the whole world differently. But when I draw the world, I kind of think that my world looks more convincing if it has light and shadow in it. And when you put light and shadow on something like a frog, they're kind of a little bit damp and maybe a little slimy. So they're going to get shiny too. So he's not going to catch lights and shadows the same way everywhere. All right, think about what shiny things look like. And they've always got a little bit of dark and a little bit of light kind of dancing around on them. So that's what I think is going to happen to this guy. I'll even go ahead and shade in his background a little bit. And that way we'll know that when we look at white paper showing through, that it's not just because I forgot to put something there, but that it's actually because those areas are the lightest parts of the picture. And like I said, that's not something every artist does, and that's not something that every picture needs. But when I draw pictures, I've discovered that there's a certain amount of realistic light and shadow that the worlds I make kind of want. All right, maybe we should even think of like places that a frog might be playing the banjo. So I think if I give him a cowboy hat, then it becomes perfectly reasonable that he's sort of like out on the lonesome prairie playing his banjo. See what I mean about erasing and fixing things? Sometimes you have to draw a hat to know if you've drawn the hat right or wrong. I'm making the sky a little dark back here just because, you know, that is when frogs do most of their singing, and that's definitely when they do the 5-string banjo practice. Because if they hit a wrong note, it's harder to see who did it. That's why I practice my banjo at night. I figure frogs must have a very similar way of thinking about it. All right, and then just so we know where we are, we'll put a cactus back here. Also got some light and shadow on it. And then maybe a tumbleweed, which is just like a dried out ball of grassy stuff that really gets moving when the wind catches it. All right, so I think we've got all the makings of a picture here. We've got a frog. We've got his 5-string banjo. We've got his flailing fingers really working at getting all 5 of those strings. It's not easy. Just so that, you know, he seems like he's got a good reason to be out here in the desert. We've given him a cowboy hat and some cactus and some tumbleweed. And he's just ready to go out there and find his own story, isn't he? And that, I won't say that is how you draw a frog, but I will say that is how I draw a frog. Your frogs may have very different hobbies, and that is completely okay. Because they've got fingers, they've got toes, they've got mouths and eyes. There's lots of things that a frog can do if you really want it to badly enough, I think. So now we're going to go back over to that first camera, and we're going to sing a little bit about frogs. Alright, so we should be switching the microphone, and we should be switching the camera.
And I should have switched up into the Adam Gustavson who just wanders around with a guitar. So, without further ado, the sun is sinking down, the moon is on the rise. Any second now the stars will start to glow. The night is full of mysteries and quiet, but at least there is something I can tell you that I know. The froggies do not want to sleep. No dreaming of dreams, no counting of sheep. They're really just too busy with so much to do. There's just no point in snoozing at the chance of losing a minute of accordion or unicycle riding. Dressing up so fancy before seeking and hiding. Drives in the country, jousting on horseback, underwater dancing to Beethoven and Dvorak. And if they load themselves in cannons, it should come as no surprise to find them deep in outer space with stardust in their eyes. The froggies do not want to sleep. They hope they've made themselves clear, 'cause they're not even sleepy or running out of steam. yawning just a little bit or drifting off to dream. No, the froggies do not want to sleep. The froggies do not want to sleep. They want to hop, 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 and they don't want to stop. The froggies do not want to sleep. The froggies do not want to sleep. The froggies do not want to sleep. They want to hop, 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 and they don't want to stop. The froggies do not want to sleep. They want to hop, 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 and they don't want to stop. The froggies do not want to sleep. They want to hop, 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 and they don't want to stop. Oh, the froggies do not want to. Sorry about that. The Froggy Song. Now, I think that puts us in a good time for any questions, or I can just think of things to talk about, but I'd like to open it up for questions.
If anyone has any questions for Adam, please write them in the chat. Adam, that song was awesome. I didn't expect that for this event. Right before, he's like, "Oh, I have a guitar," and I was like, "All right." That was awesome.
That's, I mean,
so cool.
Theme songs.
Every picture book should come with a theme song. That's awesome. Let's see. Oh, did you come up with the words in the book before making the pictures?
I kind of came up with them a little bit. It was a little back and forth. So the start of the book, I wrote the words first. And then when I started to draw them, there was a little bit of thinking that kind of went on as far as what words would get what kinds of pictures. Because one thing about the book, I should say first off, as much as we're talking about frogs, everyone has probably figured out by now this book is not really about frogs. It's about imaginary frogs. So imaginary frogs, I wanted it to be really clear from the start. They don't live anywhere. They just live in the blank pages of the book. So imaginary frogs with imaginations can kind of do anything. So while I knew they could hop, and I knew I wanted them to play an instrument, and then I thought about a couple things before I realized that unicycles would be just a much more natural fit than lots of other things you could ride. When I realized that the book was going to slowly get more and more background as the things that the frogs imagined got more incredible, then I started kind of drawing and writing at the same time. So that, if we looked at, if you remember back to that reading, everything starts off on these blank pages. And the thing about, playing accordion, you can actually do that. And it's fun, but it's also kind of work, right? And riding a unicycle, even if it was a bicycle or a tricycle, it's still going to be fun that takes a fair amount of work. But there are real things you can do. Now, dress up is a real thing you can do, but you're doing it to pretend to be something. You dress up as something and then you can be that thing. But once we get to driving our cars through the country, and especially if it's like a big old long-nosed Duesenberg with pipes and things sticking out of the sides of it, and frogs stuck in the rumble seat, which is this very illegal now way to ride in a car, unless you're an imaginary frog. Now we're getting to things that you kind of can do, but you're probably pretending you're doing them. And that's the point where, as long as we're pretending to do things, they can just get crazier. And I figure by the time we shoot ourselves out of a cannon, all bets are off. And where we go after that, suddenly that's the point when you're playing that you have an idea, and then you go, all right, let's play that for a little while. And then you have an idea, and you say, let's play that for a little while. And you might have an idea, and you play that for a little. But at some point, you're going to start playing, and let's say you're going to be a knight fighting a dragon. But now you're going to say, oh, I need to go find a dragon. Well, maybe now the dragon and I are going to make friends, actually. And maybe now the dragon and I are going to go find a castle and team up against that king who sent me out to kill a dragon. And now we're going to get lost in the woods on our way to find the castle because we're going in the wrong direction. So now I'm going to fly with the dragon. Now we're going to realize flying is way more fun than fighting anyway. So now we're just going to go on a flying adventure. And you see how, like, there's a point where the thing you're playing just starts getting its own story. And so I wanted us to try a bunch of crazy things as frogs. And then at some point, we're going to hit that moment where, as long as we're in space, we might as well meet some space monsters. That was a really long way to answer that question, though. But that was awesome. Sort of why like some of it first and some of it got drawn. Yeah, because sometimes I had to kind of go, I think I know what I want to happen. Let me see if I could, what it's going to look like if I draw it, and see if it's a good idea. So a lot of my drawings actually looked like the pencil drawing that we just did today. They were, you know, they weren't in color. They were done with pencil. Sometimes they were done on, you know, different colors of paper. So I could think differently about how light or dark things were going to be. But there were a fair amount of steps to it. But the, you know, even drawing little scribbly frogs while thinking of the writing kind of went hand in hand.
I love the spread so much. This is the coolest spread.
That might be them figuring out how to fit them in there and designing a spaceship. I mean, that was the kind of fun part too, is aside from figuring out how to draw frogs, what kind of spaceships do frogs fly around in? You know, spaceships have been around for a while. Pretend spaceships have been around even longer.
What were some of your favorite bedtime stories growing up?
All right, there's two different kinds. My favorite real books, my mom would mostly read, and my mom did lots of voices and characters when she read books. So there was a book called Piggy Wiglet, which was a rhyming book about a pig who left the barnyard to go see the world. And in the course, meets all sorts of animals who kind of want to be his friend, but it's mostly because he looks delicious. And that one and the Mercer Mayer book, One Monster After Another, really stick in my mind.
Excellent.
Though the thing is, when my dad was in charge of bedtime, he would just make stories up. And so in that case, the Farmer McTavish stories with his farm of talking vegetables were the highlights. And the more tired he got, the more unpredictable the stories became.
That's awesome. Have you always wanted to be an illustrator?
Yeah, well, yes, but with a catch. Like, because at some point I wanted to be more exciting things than me. So there was definitely a time I wanted to be a cowboy. There was probably a time I wanted to own an alligator ranch. There was a brief time where I thought about being an astronaut. But what would happen is every time I wanted to be something, I would just draw it a lot. As a matter of fact, the first time I rode a horse, I found out I was really, really allergic to them. So I got much better at drawing horses than riding horses, and it was much more enjoyable. So it was pretty early on that I realized that my interest in things was mostly in what they looked like and what drawing them was like. And that things in drawings could go on adventures that I couldn't.
And what was your favorite spread to draw in this book?
My favorite spread to draw, you know, it probably does. Let's see. It's kind of a toss-up between the opera and the spaceships. There's a couple spreads later that I haven't shown that also come close. But the thing that was interesting about both of these is they were very different pictures. Like in this case, we only see little bits of frogs, and I dressed them like Russian cosmonauts from the 1950s. But trying to figure out how many of them I could fit in there, and then how the light would hit the glass and reflect off, and what a frog's hand looks like when it does that against the glass, and getting that much distance around and giving, you know, faces to the planet. So the longer I thought about it in the drawing and the painting, the more things there were to figure out and try out. But they were all, most of them are kind of little, you know. We only see little bits of the frogs, and they're only about that big. When we got to this one, it's just one big frog, and it was this point of going, oh, like, I know I've been painting frogs this big. You know, they're not tiny, but when we go to space, we can see a lot more of that individual frog. We can see, you know, how slimy or shiny he is. We can see, like, I had to decide, like, how realistic do I want to draw frog tongues? And I decided only that realistic. Real frog tongues are weird. If I drew a real frog tongue, no one would believe me it was a frog tongue. But so that was such a different way of thinking than painting that one.
That's so cool. That one almost looks 3D. It looks like that rocket ship's really coming out of the,
you know. So when you paint something like this, it only takes us you know, 15 minutes to read the whole book, and that's if we're being really dramatic. But that picture took days, and it was layers of paint on top of each other. And every time it looked like it was kind of done, I would back up and think, well, what if outer space is just a little darker in that part? What if it gets a couple more stars that are even smaller? What if I put one more reflection on the edge of the spaceship so it really stands out? And I just kept backing up and doing this a lot. And then I would do this. Pardon me. I would do this. And it just a good day or so of that, of just touching little things and straightening out little lines and putting little reflections on things, and then sometimes deciding that that reflection was a terrible idea and repainting a frog's eyeball.
Do you have another project in the works? I know this one just came out.
There's always something. I've got a lot of things that I'm trying right now. So I'm trying to think of what happens next here. And I don't know if it's things that frogs don't want to do, or if it revolves around some other subplot in this very complicated storyline that I've created.
That's fantastic. To see
but I also do a lot of historical fiction and nonfiction books too. So there's a couple things there that I might be working on soon.
Excellent. And you click that green link, that will link to all of Adam's books. So all of the ones that he's illustrated as well that we have, you can order them too. I think that was the last question. Adam, thank you so much. This was so fun. The song is amazing. And when you order the book from us, when you click that green button, you're going to get one of these super cool book plates, which it's a sticker and it goes on the inside cover of the book, or whatever page you want to put it on, so you don't cover up this amazing.
That's right. I was very careful to leave lots of blank page on that title page.
Yes. You put it right here. It sticks in, then you have an autographed copy, and when you scan the QR code with your phone, it'll bring you to a Froggies music video, which is just amazing. Highly recommend watching it. Thank you so much, Adam. This was so fun.
For hosting.
Click that green button. Support Adam. Support An Unlikely Story. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe. Stay cool. I know it's hot out. It's the perfect time to stay in the AC and read. Find out what happens with the Froggies. See where their adventure takes them. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.